Good evening and welcome to SportsVoice on WNUR Sports. I'm Claire Connor here with Sammy Krimstein, your other host for this evening.
Yeah.
Sammy, this is our second to last SportsVoice episode.
Yeah, this is true.
I'm already tearing up a bit.
Yeah, man, this is crazy.
But I think we'll, as always, we'll do our kind of weekly recap from everyone. I'm having a good week. It's busy. It's, reading week coming up. Got a lot of papers to work on. Got a lot of sports to watch. Great sports. We'll talk about that a little later, but what's up with you?
Yeah, it's been, the past 2 or 3 weeks have been quite the past 2 or 3 weeks. As I'm sure it has been for a lot of us, it's quarter system, it's crazy. But I will say, it was 55 degrees today, and it has never felt better. Really good to be warm outside for a little bit, and I'm excited for more warm weather. I'm excited to get all these finals over with. I'm excited for spring quarter. I'm excited to talk about sports, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Claire, we're going to start with some men's basketball.
Wait, you have to...
Oh,
first, we got to introduce our guests first. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves because we're starting a little late tonight. But first, to introduce our guests, we've got Calvin, Pearson, and Jonah. Pretty classic trio for us. We've had this trio quite a bit. However, this is only Block A. We are doing a 2-block SportsVoice episode. We're going to have 6 guests in total. Right now, we've got Calvin, Pearson, and Jonah. Later on tonight, we're going to get Braden, Aiden, and Ethan. Maybe Brendan. Is Brendan no longer joining us?
I believe Brendan will not be joining us.
We might not have Brendan tonight. But so far this evening, we have Calvin, Jonah, and Pearson here with us. And so maybe you can tell us a little bit about your week as we get into sports, just so we can save time a little bit. But we're going to start off with some men's basketball. 2 frustrating losses to finish off the season for the Cats, which, overall felt lackluster to people, but showed a lot of fight and really kind of fed into the true identity of this team. The first at home against UCLA was a 73-69 loss. Cats basically overcame a 14-point deficit with 2 minutes left in the game. A heroic comeback, spearheaded mostly by Ty Berry, the graduating senior, and so, that was a difficult loss. Maryland game, that was an away game. I don't think anyone expected a victory there, far less close, 74-61 victory for the Terrapins. But that basically ends the regular season for the Cats. We do have the Big Ten tournament ahead of us. I think the bubble has been burst, no pun intended, for most people's March Madness hopes. We'll get to that later. But for now, from each of you, what's one word that you would have to describe the regular season? And, with the Cats playing Minnesota in the first round in the Big Ten tournament coming up, what are your thoughts on this game? We'll start with Calvin.
Yeah, I think snake bitten is the one word, just because you have the injuries and you have all sorts of bad luck, questionable refereeing, and a lot of times where this team really played up to its potential and still didn't quite come through in close games. So I think that's been the story of the season. But at the same time, though, I think Northwestern, obviously, like you mentioned, Claire, the bubble has been burst, but there is hopefully a chance that Northwestern will be able to win at least one, maybe a couple games in this Big Ten tournament, go on a little mini run. It starts with Minnesota. Obviously, they're led by Dawson Garcia, but this is a really beatable team. I actually do think Northwestern is going to win. They're going to have to face Wisconsin afterwards, though. That game is a lot tougher. The Badgers are just really, really solid all around. John Tonje is tough to stop. First team All-Big Ten lock for sure, and contender for Big Ten Player of the Year. So at the end of the day, I think if I had to predict it right now, it's going to be a win against Minnesota, a loss against Wisconsin, and maybe a trip to the College Basketball Crown or the NIT. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, my word would be bewilderment. I think that, not bewilderment in the sense that, the expectations were interesting this season. I think everyone thought that they could be there, but there was no, expectation. Last year, there was, they should be there. Like Calvin said, a lot of questionable things happened, a lot of things that just didn't go the Cats' way, and I think that just kind of left me a sense of just kind of dang, I don't really know what to say. I could be mad, but the more I get mad, it just makes me sad, and I don't want to be sad. I have 3 finals tomorrow. I can't be thinking about stuff like that.
Wow, they really...
Yeah.
One of them, I guess, 3 of us are in the same class
Sammy,
for that.
Calvin, and I, and
good luck on that.
Introduction to
2 other
International
finals.
Relations. Yeah, it's rough. It's rough for sure. But yeah, I would say that for sure, and I think that for Northwestern, hopefully next season with new recruits, they can be a lot better. But I guess it remains to be seen. So
I think I'm going to have to go with storybook, but maybe something out of a Stephen King novel. This season, just as Pearson talked about, didn't really have super high expectations, but seemed like it could have just been so much better for the Cats. And I think we saw them finish on a relatively good note with their first away wins of the season, which is good heading into the Big Ten tournament, despite the very unfortunate UCLA loss that almost seemed like they were going to pull out the miracle finish. I think overall they should be not content, but considering the way the luck went for and against them, they should be kind of happy that they're the 13th seed, even though they could have been, with just a couple other games, top 10 in the conference, even better. So I guess we'll see this coming week.
And one other thing really quickly, got a text, I won't say from who, but someone who's listening to or watched the Sports Night show on Thursday, and I will say, Sammy and I did not jinx the Maryland game. Just because KJ Wyndham shot 2 for 10 and just because they lost the game does not mean that it was our fault.
Oh God, yeah.
But yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, no, that is no need to talk about that.
Yes.
Yeah, no need at all.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm so convinced by that, but we will move on, much like the Cats. So I guess we have kind of a question here. I know where I land, but the question is, do the Cats need to win the entire tournament to get that at-large bid to make March Madness? I think the answer is yes. The bracket just, fortunately, in my opinion, is decided mostly based on your regular season resume, and the Cats don't have a good one. And short of winning the whole tournament, I just don't think there's a path to them. Anyone who says that they're on the bubble, I just don't understand it. The bubble has shrunk well beyond that at this point. But some people do think that if they manage to make a deep run, if you beat Minnesota, that's a winnable game. Wisconsin, I think the Cats should be pretty scared of Wisconsin. Maybe happy that Wisconsin isn't Oregon in this situation, but that's still a tough game. They could technically, feasibly beat UCLA, at least after the game that we saw, but, a deep run feels unlikely, but still to me would not be enough for March Madness. So, how well do you guys think we match up with these opponents, and how far do you think we have to get to be in March Madness territory?
Sadly, I'd say, I don't know. I would hope that Northwestern would beat Minnesota, which should be probably the most winnable game of arguably maybe even of the tournament for any team. But I don't know. I think that also, this path might also be the easiest one that the Wildcats could have come across. Not having to play a Rutgers or an Iowa or an Ohio State is big. At the same time, though, it will be rough. I would argue, though, that if they do make the final, I think that could be enough, because that would mean that not only would they have been Wisconsin, UCLA, and Minnesota, but they also would have been what is presumably a 2 seed in the NCAA tournament in Michigan State. I think that alone, if it is a convincing win, could be one that could push them over the edge, but in reality, it really won't matter, because I think there's a very slim chance they even get past the second round.
Yeah, well, I actually disagree. I don't think they're going to make it even if they make the final. I think they have to win the Big Ten tournament because they'd still be 11-14 in total conference games in the season. I just don't think that's going to be enough for Northwestern given while they played this year overall. But yeah, I also don't know if they match up particularly well. I think Minnesota is going to be a win, like I said, but the problem with this team the last 2 games has been rebounding. It's been really, really bad. They've been minus 36 combined on rebounds in the past 2 games. That's just really as brutal as it gets. No one thought it would get that much worse after UCLA, but then Maryland out-rebounded the Cats 45-23. So that just can't happen because the Cats, outside of that, have really been playing up to their potential. I think someone like KJ Wyndham, you could say maybe he's had an off last couple of games. Certainly against Maryland he did, but for the most part, the Cats are putting in that effort. They're fighting for turnovers. They forced a lot in the first half against Maryland. It's just, they got to obviously knock down open threes, which has been a little bit inconsistent, but more importantly, just rebound the ball. Stop giving second chance points, because if Maryland's not getting any empty possessions in that game, it's just what we saw, where they're slowly trotting away with it in the second half. Anytime there's an open three, it risks just that one open three just being the dagger. And so at the end of the day, Northwestern's ceiling is capped if they can't rebound the ball. This is weirdly kind of a new issue, at least to the extent of how bad it's been, but I expect it to continue to an extent in the tournament, and so I don't think they're going to make a run past the second round.
Yeah, I agree with Calvin. It's almost impossible to ask more out of Nick Marnelli at this point, considering how much he's stepped up for this injury-ridden team, but he was getting so many offensive boards over the final stretch of Big Ten play, And so if he were somehow able to continue his high scoring as well as getting those boards, which is unfortunate that you have to ask that from someone who basically plays the shooting guard small forward position, but I think it would almost be better for this team to not make a big run and not have high hopes on this season, simply because I think the look to the future is a lot better than just what they have now, and I think being able to push this season behind and build off like the mistakes that they made and not things that were luck based would be good going forward, like with what Pearson talked about, the new recruits coming, and I think they have a really solid future if they're able to build on what they need to work on.
Well, Jonah, you're definitely right about a solid future up ahead. Regardless of his performance in the Maryland game, I think people can be really excited about KJ Wyndham, who is so talented, has so much swagger for a true freshman. Just such a fun guy to watch, and obviously with this new recruiting class coming in, we are going to move briefly to women's lacrosse before we talk about baseball. The Cats handily defeated Marquette 19-9 this past week. This was another big game. The Cats taking care of business against a decent team. This game, I think, a lot of folks have been talking about the rest of the season for the Cats so far. Obviously, there was that tough Boston College loss, which kind of had a lot of people thinking, what is the identity of this team without Izzy Skane and Erin Quinkendall? This is traditionally such a homegrown team. Who are we with transfers like Nikki Miles or Riley Campbell? And the Cats really showed up to answer that question. They went on the road, beat Syracuse. I think Marquette, is another example of a game, obviously against not nearly as good of a team, where the Cats are kind of showing who they can be. But beyond their defense, which has been just as solid this season as all of last year, we're really starting to see the offense shine. They had an explosive offensive performance in this game. So with conference play starting up next week, we're going to start to hit teams like Michigan, like Maryland. We're going to face off against North Carolina, not a conference team, but a really solid team up ahead. How can we interpret this offensive explosion that we saw in the Marquette game, that we've been seeing kind of build up slowly throughout the first part of the season? Where do we think we stand?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a situation where Northwestern does end up going undefeated in Big Ten play, and I don't think their biggest test left on the schedule is a Big Ten matchup. I think it's got to be that game against North Carolina at home on March 27th, because the Tar Heels, Boston College, and Northwestern, I think, are really the only teams this season that have shown consistent dominance at the top level. Obviously, Northwestern, the exception being their loss to Boston College, but since Boston College is part of that group of three, I didn't, count that game in my analysis there. But I think, Michigan's shown some vulnerability. They just had a big-time upset loss recently, so they got now 2 losses on the season, and it's going to be interesting to see. In terms of this Marquette game, Marquette was actually very efficient with 5 shots and 4 goals in the first quarter of things, but after that, the defense really stepped up. 8 goals for Madison Taylor, which is just kind of insane to think about, but a lot of other players contributed as well, and I think Maddie Taylor ends up probably being the goal-scoring leader in the country by the end of the season. But yeah, Michigan, it's not that they're not that vulnerable. They lost to a Denver team, which, by the way, it's not like Denver's bad. Denver's actually a pretty good lacrosse team this season, but it's still a game, home or road, that Michigan should have won. And then they beat Colorado 12-7. So certainly, I think North Carolina is the biggest test going forward.
I'll keep it quick. I agree with you, Calvin. I think they will go undefeated. I think North Carolina is a big game. I think Michigan's also a big game. I will just say, in the Marquette game, I had some friends. Again, I guess this is a shout-out show for me, but 2 friends from Marquette, Ryan Feeney and Ozzy Moreno, said that Marquette would win. And, what are y'all talking about, Tommy? They're back in Chicago now, so now we're in the land of winning. So I'm happy they're in the land of winning and not in the land of losing. So sad for y'all, but not sad for me.
Maddie Taylor, 18 straight games with a hat trick, which is just, obviously she has stepped up her scoring this season as the number 1 option on this team, and I think just she'll continue that, and they look like, despite the loss to Boston College, I think they'll be able to bounce back, in the playoffs, which they'll obviously get to, and I think they'll be a top 3 team, possibly winning the championship.
Yeah, it's looking forward to Big Ten play for sure, especially those marquee matchups with teams like Michigan, teams like Maryland, like Claire mentioned. And I think the expectation for this team does have to be to sweep this conference. If you plan to win a national championship, that is how you put yourself in a position to do that and get yourself in that conversation. And really, for Northwestern, keep yourself in that conversation because you're already there. Big things coming for lacrosse. And real quick before Pick'em, I want to hit on baseball because They had an interesting weekend, split a series at Citadel, one at college, one of the, I believe, North Carolina? One of the Carolinas, I believe. Yes, fact check me on that. Let's see. Citadel College, South Carolina. There we go. I chose the wrong one. It's in Charleston. The Citadel side, the series split for Northwestern. They lost the first two. They won the second two games. And today's win was big because they finally got some offense. They hadn't scored more than 4 runs in the series. And then finally, 10 runs today. Everyone was contributing. It was a big day for Northwestern. So I just want to kind of go around to everybody, takeaways from the series, and also if anyone wants to comment on Garrett Shearer, because that is a big question mark. Northwestern's ace pitcher, has not pitched the past 2 weekends. That is concerning. So just general thoughts on the baseball team. Keep it succinct, and we're going to get to pick 'em. So, yeah.
I think if Shearer's out, it's a huge blow for the Wildcats.
Absolutely.
And probably might even, I would argue, tank their season completely. I mean, they're already starting a little bit better, I guess, than past seasons, being at the very, very bottom of the barrel. But I think that without a guy like Shearer, you're going to really struggle to get any of those quality wins that they would need to do substantially better this season, especially once they start playing a lot of Big Ten teams. And yeah, I mean, I think the baseball season will be interesting to see this year. A lot of cool guys and cool faces, and of course DG's back for a second year, which is pretty cool to have consistency. But we'll see where the wind blows, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the loss of Shearer is huge. This pitching staff just does not have a lot of depth to replace him. But big time that the Cats got 2 wins in Game 3 and Game 4, because this series, it could have gotten ugly real fast, and so they needed some momentum, especially on offense.
I think despite Shearer being out, this series is a good look for the pitching and just the defense overall, because they only gave up a couple runs per game. Like 7 was the most today, out of the entire series, as opposed to games like against Duke where they gave up 11 and 14. So I think that's a good look for the future.
Yeah, no, I agree with what everyone said. Good to see the pitching. Leboki was awesome in Game 3. 6 innings, 1 earned run, 5 hits, and also some other very solid performances. Also, shout out Preston Knott, who I believe had a home run today, and a big one. He's been swinging the bat really nicely. There's some pieces. There's some fun to be had with this team. We'll see what happens. Big Ten play starts this week. The baseball season back. Really excited for that. They'll be playing Penn State this weekend, starting Friday, right here in Evanston. How about that? The weather is finally warm enough where we can actually throw and hit baseballs outside. But without further ado, let's do some pick'em, and Claire, I'll throw it to you.
All right, folks. As Sammy and I near our the end to our time as SportsVoice hosts, the pick'ems are just going to go off the rails a little bit. So we've got some interesting ones for you here tonight. Our first, I'm calling Shanty Time. If you missed it on Late Night with Jimmy Fallon, St. John's was the Tonight Show. I always forget what these shows are called.
Yes,
It's the
his is Tonight
This
Show,
is the
yeah.
Tonight Show. On the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, St. John's men's basketball was featured in the cold open with a sea shanty about them. And it's a parody to, is it like the Wellerman song or something?
I couldn't tell you what it's actually called,
Yeah.
but yeah.
The only way I can identify it is by singing it, and I'm not going to do that. So you should look up this parody. It's completely real. But we're going to have all 3 of our guests pick a likely March Madness team and give them any type of segment on a comedy show. So this can be an SNL sketch, a late night game or interview, a sitcom, you name it, really, whatever you want. Be creative. Explain to us what's happening. Calvin, we'll start with you.
All right, I'm going to be totally honest. I actually just copied the SportsVoice doc earlier in the day, and I did not see the updated pick'em segments, but we will go, on the fly with this one. I think a segment on a comedy show, that's a very, very, very fascinating question that we got to look at. I think at the end of the day, probably got to go with, something along the lines of, I think Rutgers is a really good team to add for a comedy show, just like, I don't know, Late Night with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, because what you really have is 2 players with big aspirations, maybe much bigger than anyone else on their team, and really a lot of guys as well who, you could argue it's coaching staff, you could argue sort of, at the end of the day, argue all sorts of things about what's gone wrong with this team, but certainly nobody expected them to miss the NCAA tournament, or at least very few people with this amount of talent. And so I think at the end of the day, I guess this does say likely March Madness team, but if Rutgers went on a run, were to make March Madness, I think that that's this kind of just a comedy in terms of a comedy of errors of this team this season.
I think that's Northwestern PTSD. Like, Ace Bailey makes you look like a laughingstock when you're at home, and then you turn on your TV and you're like, shoot, this is not what I expected.
Okay, so for mine, usually, I'll be going with like a Chicago type one. For this one, I'm going to go with the Arizona Wildcats. And interestingly enough, our fellow Wildcat team, their slogan their motto is bear down. And so I think it'd be really, really cool. A big SNL thing is Bill Swirsky's super fans, the Da Bears and all that type of stuff.
Da Bears.
I would love to see how the Arizona Wildcats basketball team, they can go and say bear down and think that it's their bear down, but then when they go and face Bill Swirsky and his guys, I don't think they're going to be able to keep that chant alive. And
absolutely not.
And
you just
exactly.
Really can't.
And interestingly enough, the reason why Arizona even has this slogan is because a guy named Salmon flipped upside down in like a river on his car or something. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly, but that would be my segment. It's kind of a bear down battle.
For this question, I had to take some inspiration from my friend of the artificial intelligence generational internet website, ChatGPT, who gave me the wonderful idea of having a mock.
Transparency is key.
Yeah, I know.
Of course,
Disqualify.
I would never take credit for this.
This is within Medill's AI ethics code.
Absolutely.
He's disclosed the use, so we're all good here.
We're all good.
A mock true crime documentary that investigates Tom Izzo anger and being angry while winning and not being able to lose in March Madness, and the investigators are just dumbfounded by his coaching habits and his skills that he brings to the college basketball coaching world.
All right, those are some good ones. Are we going to do winners now or at the end? What are we doing?
We can do winners at the end. I do think
All
we
right.
should transition into our clue question though, because that feels like a good segue, and then you can do.
Sure,
you can
sounds
do
good.
our clue
Here,
after
you
the end.
can do clue.
Yeah, so our second pick'em, I was gonna go after Sammy was gonna go in the middle here, but I think the mystery show kind of segues us pretty nicely. So we've been thinking about and talking about the board game Clue a little bit recently, and we thought it would be kind of fun to do a fake version of this with the station, with the two of us. So Sammy and Claire are found murdered, and you have to figure out. No,
Alright.
you sound so disappointed, Pearson.
He's trying to get brownie points.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. No, we're not picking next year's co-host. You gotta.
No.
have to-
For pick'em.
Oh, for pick'em.
I have no role in
I was like,
picking
you
that.
should
That
be
is not
buttering
me.
up Adam and Ethan. Like, what are we? Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we're found murdered. You have to figure out which station member or members did it, how, and where. Much like one of our favorite childhood board games, Sammy. So the murder has to have a sports component to it, because we're trying to stay within the boundaries of sports radio. But I said it would go off the rails, so we're gonna go the opposite way this time. We'll start with Jonah. If this is also ChatGPT, then I'm kicking you out of the OCR.
I'm somewhat creative.
Good job.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. I think the accused party in this murder trial is the duo of Leo Tesler and Brendan Faceman, as after dark they killed
SportsVoice After
SportsVoice.
That's
Dark.
good. Okay,
That's
that's
good.
good.
That's
And
good.
they committed this crime supposedly with the Comrex, of
With the
course.
Comrex.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Comrex
Yeah.
has almost killed me a lot of times. I
I want to kill the comrades.
Wow,
If we're being
host
honest.
of
Yeah.
SportsVoice After Dark killed
Kills-
the SportsVoice host.
I
That's
think
pretty good.
that's an intriguing storyline.
That's pretty good. Okay, Pearson, what do we got?
Okay, so earlier on this year there was supposed to be an underclassmen versus upperclassmen football game.
There still will be.
I know there
Every
still will
quarter
be.
There will be.
But I don't know. I
Don't
feel
you
like
worry.
I feel like the upperclassmen here just seem to be scared of us underclassmen. I think they are the conspirators here. We might have been playing the game, and I think Sammy and Claire, both of you always talk about things being electric, and so I think here. The murder weapon, I don't know how they would do it, but in some way, we're all just playing football, and Sammy and Claire go down on some sort of wire, and they go down electrically.
Oh, no.
I know it's very
no.
tragic, but I think they're just conspiring because they're too scared. They don't want to play us, and so
That also could be Brendan and Leo, and that's
Yeah,
I mean
honestly
they,
agree with
they
did
could be
it,
a repeat.
yeah.
They could maybe 2 attempts.
yeah.
2 attempts. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for me, this is actually, I'm going to have two sort of separate incidents happen at the same time, and that's really going to add sort of like a spookiness factor to this, because you really realize like just how targeted this must be if both Sports Voice hosts are in different places and go down at the same time. I mean, for Sammy, I know you've survived a basketball injury once. I don't think it's happening again. I think this time, as you go for a turnaround hook shot, Nick Martinelli type of thing, another flying elbow to the eye, and that's going to be about it. And then, of course, Claire, I mean...
I could only survive one. I was only so lucky.
And, of course, Claire, I know you've spent a lot of time, calling lacrosse games for WNUR and around the lacrosse pitch. I think we're going to see one of the worst passes we've ever seen out of a Northwestern player just fly out of play right at the table at midfield. And, I mean, I don't think I need to say any more. It would be, of course, very tragic. Quite the tragic coincidence to happen at the exact same time. But, I mean, suspicions of foul play, there's going to have to be an investigation. I mean, of course, well, who better to do it than the Medill School of Journalism investigating just how this went down, whether this was a coordinated attack.
Oh, man, good answer.
Too bad they couldn't have stopped it on the front end, but whatever. It's okay. We'll forgive them. Now to our third pick'em. And we're going to make this real quick because we're going to switch to our B block in about 1 or 2 minutes. So this is called Welcome Back. There are so many incredible athletes that we, of course, never got the chance to watch growing up. So I'm just asking you to bring back one of those athletes. Who are you going to put in today's modern game? And we'll start with Calvin for this one.
This is super easy. It's got to be Jim Thorpe, because think about how many sports he played: baseball, football, basketball, Olympics, this and that. It's an experiment to see just how far sports talent has progressed in the last 110 years. It's not necessarily saying that Jim Thorpe is going to be fantastic in today's NFL, because, quite frankly, football was not the same 110 years ago that it was now. But the question is, I mean, how well would he measure up? Because you have to think about, I mean, you could really do this with any athlete from any era. You could even do it with someone like MJ, like see is Michael Jordan really an average basketball player in today's NBA, or is this just like a casual take that people throw out there? But for me, Jim Thorpe played so many sports. I want to see if actually he was like, how much of an athletic freak he was. Because if he's competitive in even one of these, that's just incredible.
For me, I was kind of having trouble choosing here between two Chicago people. My first thought was Mark Aguirre, DePaul Blue Demon. I think he's one of the most underappreciated parts of the Pistons championships in '89 and '90, as well as one of the best Mavericks of all time, below Luka and, of course, below Dirk. But I think he's one of those guys who's like right on the line of Hall of Fame, and I think that maybe in the modern game, his game might translate even more, being a great defender. My other one, though, another Chicago one, and maybe not in the way you're thinking, but George Mikan. I would love to see him kind of doing his like very rudimentary, the blackboard was just invented, and see what he could do. He played for the Chicago American Gears of the National Basketball League.
There's a poll.
So that's what I'm choosing again. But he has some prolific rebounding and shot blocking, so I would love to see that. And maybe he could just do like a little like two-hand shot. I don't know. Maybe we need to see more people like me playing basketball in that way should be able to make the NBA.
I would have gone with my dad's favorite Bear of all time, Walter Payton, but I'm going to have to say Jim McMahon, the king of aura himself, was just owning the National Football League when he, of course, was the most important part of the 85 Bears.
Well, of course.
With his just...
the defense was terrible. It's not like they had a good running back.
His generational impact.
The
so I
shuffling
think
crew.
just seeing maybe a Jay Cutler-esque player and come join the Bears today would be wonderful to see.
Well, let's see. We will very quickly decide these winners, and then we're going to switch it to our B block and get our other crew of 3 in here. We're excited to see them. We'll go in order, I guess, of which questions. So.
Okay, great. All right, Shanny time. This one's tough. I think, the original was just so good. St. John's, Rick Pitino, weirdest thing I've ever seen on The Tonight Show. I'm going to have to go with Pearson's here. I think it was creative. It wasn't generated by artificial intelligence or on the spot. So you definitely had an advantage there, Pearson. But I thought your answer about Arizona was pretty good.
Yeah, and we'll go, I guess, in a slightly different order than how we did it on the show. But for the one we just did, some good answers. I'm going to have to go with Jonah. Play into the Chicago thing. You know what, Jim McMahon, I would like to see what he does. Because I don't think it would be much. But you know what?
Could he do better than Rex Grossman?
I'd love to see that swagger.
All right, and for our last one, clue, who done it? I think there's a clear winner here, and it's Jonah. I think if anyone were to get rid of Sammy and me, it would absolutely be Brendan and Leo, the hosts of SportsVoice After Dark.
Yeah.
They do it after
You
dark.
know, Brendan was going to be on the show. He left.
He left.
Should we be suspicious? I don't know.
I think we should be really suspicious. I think he might be plotting it now. And to solve the mystery, we're gonna have to say goodbye to our guests, who I guess are gonna have to go investigate on our behalf.
We'll
so.
find out
Alright.
next week on Sports Voice if there is one.
If
There
there is
will
one,
hopefully be one.
we better make it for our last episode. But we are gonna move into Block B with Braden, Aiden, and Ethan. So thank you so much to Calvin, Pearson, and Jen for coming on this edition of Sports Voice. We really hope you prep next week so we can have another mega episode with a whole bunch of guests.
And we will have some new people joining us very shortly. If you're listening over the air, you'll get some ads, and if you're on YouTube, you'll just get a nice little screen. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back to Sports Voice, our first ever mid-show commercial break, and I think it went as smoothly. And if you're watching on YouTube, be amazed because 3 new people teleported into the studio. We got Braden, we got Aiden, which will definitely not be confusing, and we got Ethan. So lots of names ending with N right now in the OACR.
And we were gonna have Brendan. That would have just.
We were gonna have Brendan.
Brendan.
That could have been the most confusing Sports Voice of all time. But we're super excited to have these guys on here. Because it looks like someone left something. It's Pearson. He's back.
I am back.
Gotta get
Don't forget
back
your
to
back with
investigate,
3
to
midterms
investigate.
tomorrow. Or
I
3
know.
finals. I told you
Yeah.
that. Well, okay.
Let's talk about basketball.
Yeah, let's talk about basketball. We'll start with NCAA basketball because it's March, and that's what you do in March. So we got Braden, we got Aiden, we got Ethan, and we are going to let's go with conference tournaments. So we've had some of the mid-majors battling it out this week, and some tickets have been punched. That's cool, but we're excited for these major conference tournaments, and I want everyone to go around and give me their predictions. Who are gonna win these big conference tournaments? We got Big Ten, SEC, ACC, Big 12, maybe Big East if we have time. I don't know if we're gonna really consider that a major. It's kind of had been in the past. I don't know if it really is anymore. That aside, we'll go in that order. So let's start with the Big Ten since we're Northwestern. We're a Big Ten school. Guys, who's gonna win this tournament? Is there a chance? Go Cats? Yes, no? Probably not. But who's going to win the Big Ten? We'll start with Braden.
Yeah, I mean, the natural way of thinking is to assume Michigan State's going to win, just because they've been so good throughout the entire year. But I think it's going to be Maryland, honestly. I think Maryland's just been on such a hot stretch to end the year. And, Derek Queen is unequivocally the best center in college basketball right now. I just think that's too tough of an opponent, even for the Spartans to overcome. So I'm going to go with Maryland.
Yeah, I think that although it's the easy pick, I am going to choose Michigan State. They've been playing very well lately. They've had, they just had the big game against Michigan today with the theatrics at the end there. So I think they're feeling very motivated. But I will say I do think Purdue is going to make the final.
I'm also gonna have to go with Michigan State. I mean, I woke up today at like 11:30, turned on my TV, and saw this game was on. They were playing Michigan. They scored 50 points in the first half. They were ridiculous. I mean, Tom Izzo has done an incredible job with this team this year. This is not the first time he's done an incredible job. He's been very consistent with this program. I think they're definitely the best team in the conference. I mean, maybe we'll see Wisconsin win a second straight, or at least get to the end close. I think they're very clutch in these situations, but I think the Spartans pull it off. If they can win this, they might have an outside chance of getting a 1 seed in the tournament. We'll see.
All right, so one more quick question about college basketball. We don't have the March Madness bracket yet, but we've been talking a little bit about some potential Cinderella teams, both on Bracket Babble in the show before us and also just on SportsVoice in previous weeks. So I want to know from each of you, what's your favorite potential Cinderella team? If you're just sort of making kind of an imaginary bracket, you don't know who they're going to face yet, but what are some teams that you like? We were talking about Drake last week. My grandma went to Drake for a year before transferring to Minnesota.
If you've been listening long enough, you heard a lot of High Point talk during bracket battle.
High
so
Point.
much High Point talk. But you know, I like Drake. In the nation's top 21 teams in forcing turnovers, offensive rebounding, defensive rebounding. They have a huge possessions edge. They're also one of the slowest teams in the country, so I think they have a lot of kind of underrated advantages. But I guess you can also pick Drake if you want to appease me or whatever.
Sure.
But who would you guys say is your kind of favorite Cinderella team?
Yeah.
Way early out.
We'll throw this in and then we'll get back to the conference, all the conferences. Yeah, like Cinderella team to break it up, and we'll go the other way around. Let's go, Ethan.
All right. I don't have that much rhyme or reason for this. I just like Vanderbilt. I think they're like a good...
There's a lot of rhyme or reason.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that they have, like, this is the first time since, I think, the Northwestern matchup, they were in the tournament in 2017. I think they've played really well. They've spoiled a lot of SEC teams at home. I think they could definitely make a run if they have the right bracket. If they're against certain teams, like, I think expect them to be around, like, an 8 or a 9, so I think if they have the right bracket, they could go very far.
Yeah, so this is a weird pick because they haven't played their conference tournament yet, and they need to win to get in, and they probably won't win to get in. But I really like St. Louis out of the A10. I don't think it. The odds are against them to make it there. They're I think they're a 5 seed going into the A10 tournament. But they have a really fun group. They have a lot of the Indiana State guys from last season. The coach came over from ISU over to the Arch.
Good old Robbie Avila, right?
Robbie Avila.
He's still hooping, yeah.
Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
You heard so much about him last year, and then all of a sudden they all go to St. Louis. You kind of forget. A10's fun.
Yeah.
I feel like there's whoever wins the A10 is always a good Cinderella pick. So if it's St. Louis, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, they got him. They got Gibson Jimerson.
I'm
too.
hoping it's gonna be. I'm hoping George Mason gets the job done. They're local, right? And they've been having quite the year. I don't know if they've been to the tournament in quite some time. So.
I think 2013 was the last
Yeah,
time. Yeah,
that sounds about right.
Really long time.
But yeah, St. Louis, although they have very long odds, is my pick.
Yeah, so I'm a little biased here. I'm going to go with a local team for me. I think Sammy will like it just because, Sammy and I have this mutual appreciation for Maction. I'm going to go with the Akron Zips.
I
think
I love the Mac.
the Akron Zips have been the best team in that conference all year. They're another team that has to win their conference tournament if they're going to be playing in March, but I think the MAC is such a weak conference overall. I think Akron's going to have no problem just steamrolling that tournament, and I think they're going to shock the world and win at least a round, if not 2, when they get to the tournament.
Yeah, those are some good Cinderella teams. I know there's always a few that kind of end up surprising us. I mean, as it goes, but a lot of good ones, a lot of great contenders. And so now, from Cinderellas to very much not Cinderella, if we're going to the best conference in college basketball, SEC.
I didn't realize we were doing all the conferences
No.
here. I was like, man, we gotta stall for time. I'm gonna ask a question about Cinderella.
We're all good. So SEC, great conference. Auburn's been they've really had a chokehold on the conference all year. But then I feel like these past week or so, week and a half, they've had some tricky losses. I mean, I think when was the Alabama game? I'm losing track of time. That was yesterday. That was yesterday. I was like, I think it was yesterday, but that also could have been 4 days ago because I don't know. Yes, Mark Sears hitting the shot at the buzzer. I mean, so many buzzer beater shots, by the way, the past week. But Auburn is a little bit cold right now, which they haven't been all year. Are they going to get back on track, or is one of these other teams in the SEC, which there are plenty, going to get the job done? Guys, what do we think? Anyone can start.
Okay, yeah. So I think much of the talk has been about the Auburn-Alabama sort of rivalry, and it's warranted considering how great of a game that game was the other day. But you know what team in the SEC has beaten both Auburn and Alabama? The Florida Gators. And Florida's also beaten number 22 Texas A&M. They've beaten, they've beaten Ole Miss. They just lost to Georgia a couple weeks ago, but that's just only a couple weeks after they steamrolled them by 30. I think Florida's just, they don't get the recognition that Alabama and Auburn and even Tennessee really get, but I think Florida is a dark horse and is my pick to win that conference.
I mean, I was also gonna pick Florida, but because Braden did, I'm gonna pick someone else for the interest of entertainment for value.
There we go.
I'm gonna say Auburn just because I think they're gonna be motivated. You know, coming off a tough rivalry loss against Alabama at home, I think they're gonna be very ready to get the job done. Also, I do think they face a much easier path. Not a much easier path. It's the SEC, but
there's no easy path.
Yeah, no, an easier path than most teams, considering their first game is, going to be against either Arkansas, South Carolina, or Ole Miss, and I think that's definitely the easiest draw. So I am going to pick Auburn, but I'm right there on the Florida pick as well.
I was also going to pick Florida, so I'm going to pick the other team I would have considered, which is Alabama. I mean, to go into Auburn yesterday and win, I'm very impressed. They've been very consistent over the past few years as well. I just think if it's not Florida, then not Auburn. Like, Alabama's the next best team up. This is going to be a complicated tournament for any team, though. This is a great conference, so I think any winner here is deserving. I think it's just like a super tough conference. You have three of the best teams in the country off the top, who I think have pretty equal odds to win this.
Well, you guys mentioned those three, which I mean, I would say are probably the three favorites. Maybe Tennessee over Florida for some people, but I mean, there's so many teams. I mean, Mizzou's been having a season.
Yes.
Kentucky just beat them, and they've had some moments of question, but Mark Pope has done an incredible job with that team.
Yeah.
They can make a run. I mean, I think you could probably go as far down as I'm looking at the SEC right now. I mean, you could go really far down this list and find teams that can win this conference because it's just so deep. So I would not be surprised at all if we get an 8 seed, like an Ole Miss or a 7 seed Missouri, like Texas A&M who's at 5. Right? There's just a lot of teams that can go and do damage in the SEC.
Yeah, and it's tough to to downgrade Auburn as anything other than a likely winner. I mean, Florida's great. You can't count them out. I think the truth is Auburn can compete and will probably beat most of the teams in these conference in just a shootout, which is what it ends up being.
Mm-hmm.
That Texas A&M game, I think we can really attribute to the Aggies' super solid defense, which is one of the best in the country.
Yes.
You don't really see similar defenses other than Auburn itself in the SEC, and so that complicates things a little. But I agree about the depth of this conference and all that they can do. So I guess we can move on to my favorite conference, the ACC.
Yeah. Wow, I never knew that was Claire's favorite conference, ACC.
It's my favorite basketball conference.
Favorite basketball conference. No, it for good reason. I mean, Duke has been out ahead in this conference all year. They are the runaway favorites, I would say, to win this conference. Are we going to be surprised, or is Cooper Flagg and the troops, are they going to get the job done?
I think Duke's going to win the whole thing, not just the conference tournament. I think they're going to win much matches. And I hate to say it, because Duke was my dream school, in high school. And I love Duke. I was a huge Duke basketball fan since I was 5. I ED'd there, did not get in, did not work out, but ended up working out here. So, but I have a dislike for Duke now. But I do think I'm going to put that aside and say they're too good. There's no one else in this conference who can compete with them. Cooper Flagg, Colin Canupo, they're all just way too good. And this team has been so consistent all year long. They're just dominant all across the board. So, yeah, I think they're going to win this easily.
I'll keep it short. Duke is going to win.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. Duke, that's my pick.
Well, yeah, I mean, understandable. I mean, they've been so good. Cooper Flagg, future Chicago Bull, not future Chicago Bull. That's not going to happen. Yeah, I'll be honest, sometimes with high school players who get as much hype as he does, I'm like, all right, sure, whatever. I'm very skeptical of guys like that in high school. You know what, Cooper Flagg? I was not familiar with your game. I mean, he is that guy. I'm really excited to see what he does at the next level. But let's do Big 12. This is a conference that I think took a slight step back this year, but kind of not. They added some great teams from the Pac-12. That has created some really, really fun matchups. I think of the Arizona Iowa State half court Caleb Love buzzer beater, which I somehow was watching live. That was considering how little time I had, and I just happened to put that on. Crazy. But solid conference. I'd say the best behind the SEC. And a lot of teams. Houston with their just classic Houston defense at the top, like they kind of always are. But I mean, Texas Tech is really good. BYU, watch out for them. I mean, there's a lot of teams that are very even. I think in this conference, kind of on that line. So I think Houston's the favorite, but unlike the ACC, it is very much up for grabs.
Yeah, I guess my pick's a little boring, but I'm going to go Houston. I mean, they've lost one game total in conference play, and that was a 1-point loss to Texas Tech. And I don't have enough confidence in Texas Tech that they could do it again, so Houston's my pick. I don't see anyone knocking them out at least in the conference tournament.
So, for me, I personally believe that Texas Tech is going to win the whole thing. I think that, speaking of that one Houston loss that they had to Texas Tech, it happened without Texas Tech's head coach and their best player, JT Toppin, who got ejected early. I think Texas Tech does have, some really solid depth and experience. And in general, during Sportathon, I picked them as one of my 5 potential championship teams during one of Eliav's shows. So I'm a big Texas Tech believer. So yeah, give me the Red Raiders.
Yeah, I'm going to be boring here. I'm going to go with Houston. I've doubted them too much in the past, maybe correctly. I remember Sammy Krimstein, our wonderful host here, picked them last year to win the whole thing. His bracket came in last place in the WNUR.
Wow, no need to
no need to
no need to beat around the bush there, but
I am going to be
my bracket did in fact come in last place. Last year was a brutal year, guys.
Yes.
We're gonna make a comeback. But believe it. Oh god. But Houston, they're good. They're good, and you're saying they're going to win this conference?
I think they're going to win the conference tournament. I think they're going to do a lot better in March Madness this year than they did last year.
Well, with that, I think we're gonna skip the Big East. I think, St. John's should probably win that conference. There's some other teams that have beaten them throughout the year, and keep it interesting. But I think for in the interest of time, I want to move on to some other sports. Guys, it's March, which we're talking about college basketball, whatever, blah blah blah. But it's spring training. It's baseball. The Cubs play a game in very close to being a week. A regular season
Japan,
baseball
right?
game
Or
in
South
Japan.
Korea.
I will wake up at 5 and then 6 the next day because I fly home in between. So I will be watching those games early in the morning. But I just want to hear some hot takes. Give me the hottest take you can think of for the MLB season. I know Braden's a big baseball guy. That's why part of the reason I'm so glad he came on SportsVoice. So I know Braden's been cooking up some hot takes, right? I know he's got
Absolutely.
something.
I'm gonna let you
he's
go
got
last.
something good. So Braden, you can lead us off.
Oh, never mind.
Oh, Ethan
I
said
don't know. I want to wait to hear Braden's at the end.
Okay, Ethan's gonna lead off. Okay, I can hear. Okay,
All right.
sounds good.
This was written before the news came out about an hour ago, but Garrett Cole apparently is gonna get Tommy John surgery.
Oh wow, yeah, I hadn't seen
Yeah,
that.
so that. But before this, I was gonna say I don't think the Yankees are actually gonna make the playoffs this year.
Now that's looking
That looks a
better
little
now.
bit better now, but an hour ago maybe I was crazy, but I kind of figured Cashman did not seem too optimistic. I just think they've lost a lot. I mean, Soto, people say, oh, we don't need Soto. They definitely did. And that loss is definitely, I think that loss is going to be felt to my personal gain. And I just think there's a lot of good teams in the AL this year that could compete. I mean, the AL West looks pretty strong. The Rangers look like a pretty strong team. The Astros, too. I don't know about the AL Central. That's more Braden's thing. But I think even the Orioles and the Blue Jays also look pretty good in the East. So if the Yankees are not winning that division, I could see it being tough for them to get into the wild card. We'll see how things go. I mean, they obviously still have a great chance. They're still a great team. But these big losses are certainly going to be felt.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go with a hot take that probably will anger the Chicago people in the room.
Oh no!
But I think the Cubs are gonna finish third in the NL Central this year.
Okay.
I'm not a Cubs believer whatsoever.
So who's gonna finish above the Cubs?
I think the Brewers are gonna win the division again because they always seem to win the division no matter what's going on.
Who's
there.
gonna finish in second place?
In a totally not homer pick, not based on my sweatshirt at all right now, I'm going to say the Pirates finish second in the NL Central.
You know what? I'm
really good rotation. Really good rotation.
No, I think we were having this conversation at some point. if there is a team that's going to finish above the Cubs, that's not the Brewers, it's the Pirates. But that take does anger me. I mean, but it angers me because I think there's a more real chance of that happening than we would like to admit as Cubs fans. They had a good offseason, but there were some things that they didn't go all the way on, and there's still some question marks. I mean, I fully expect the Cubs to win this division and win like 90 to 95 games. But I think there is a chance that what your scenario happens, and it does scare me because that would be really sad for the Pirates to finish above us. But I think the Pirates are underrated. They can have a good season and, I mean, kind of be in that conversation.
I mean, but the Pirates need a lot to go right with hitting.
They need a lot to go right
yeah,
with
they
hitting.
need a lot to go right with hitting.
The rotation is good enough, but, like, I mean, I can't think of any teams, but, like the Tigers last year, right? Like, I mean, they were, like, they made the playoffs, right? That lineup had nothing. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, it's not a very good lineup. You looked at it in the playoffs, you're like, what? It was the rotation. I mean, headed by one of the best young pitchers in baseball, similar to the Pirates. So, I mean, I think it's certainly possible, as much as it does very much pain me.
I don't think it aligns with Sammy's and my greatest MLB hot.
No, yeah.
We've
But we'll
been
just wait.
discussing,
Yeah. All right, Braden, how flaming hot can we go?
This is going to be really stinking flaming hot.
Flaming hot. All right.
So one of the most putrid teams in the last
Putrid,
5 or
great
6
word.
years, one of the most miserable teams has been the Oakland Athletics. Obviously, the on-field product has been awful, nothing short of awful. And they just moved out of their Oakland Coliseum, so just a terrible time to be an Athletics fan. But I think things are looking up in the future. Not only do I think that the Athletics will finish over 500 this year, I think the Athletics are going to be a wild card team. I think things are just really looking up for this team. I think you look some of these pieces on offense. You have Brent Rooker, Lawrence Butler in the outfield, Mason Miller's.
This isn't as crazy as like you would think. Like,
No, not at all. Yeah, and Mason Miller is easily a top 5 reliever in the MLB right now. They signed Luis Severino, which people, when they saw that, were like, what is the point of that? But I think it's a very underrated signing, and I think it gives them a top-of-the-line arm in their rotation. That
top of the line maybe is a stretch.
For the Athletics, I would say he probably slots into the number 2 spot, right?
Yeah, I mean, they have number 1 when I'm looking on their.
Beat the Dodgers today in spring.
Yeah, so you sign Severino, you have these guys like Rooker, Butler, Mason Miller, Esteury Ruiz all coming back. And then they have so many good prospects, or at least a couple. They have that shortstop, Jacob Wilson. He's the number 31 prospect in MLB right now. He's expected to debut this year. He should be a huge addition. Tyler Soderstrom was their 2020 first-round pick. He's been considered a top prospect by many for a while, and he's expected to have a big year this year. And on top of that, just look at the division they play in. I mean, they play 13 games against the Angels. The Mariners have a putrid offense, which they did nothing to address this offseason. I think the Rangers are a bounce-back team, but there's still a lot of holes and question marks I have with them. And the Astros got weaker. The Astros obviously will probably win that division, but they're not going to be as dominant of a team as they have been for much of the latter half of the 2010s and the early part of the 2020s. And you look at some of the other American League teams. I mean, the Tigers had all offseason to make improvements on offense, and Gleyber Torres has not moved that needle at all, in my opinion. Cleveland didn't get much better. I think the Royals will get a little better. Boston got better, but I think that there's still so many question marks with Boston, and the Royals have to stay healthy. The Yankees obviously are dealing with their own injury issues, and I think so many teams have so many question marks in the American League. I think it's completely possible that the Athletics, they probably won't win the division. I think the Rangers or the Astros have the AL West unlocked, but I think there's a very real possibility that Sacramento now sneaks into the 6th spot in the wild card.
Sacramento.
Aren't they
Weird.
just?
It is weird to say,
They don't
yeah.
have a name. They're just the Athletics.
That's
Yeah.
true. They are technically just the Athletics. I think people will still call them Sacramento if they're playing there. We'll see. No, that's it. I haven't thought about them too much. The NL Central, not literal. I mean, the just NL centric brain of mine does not think about the AL West too often.
Yeah.
But the A's, like, they have some pieces. The rotation is questionable is an understatement.
Yeah, I
If
think
Luis
with
Severino's your one,
Severino
like,
and JP Sears at the top of the. But if that offense can provide enough, I think. Look at
the
yeah,
offense
I mean,
can be legit.
you look at the Mariners, a team where like their rotation is amazing, but their offense is atrocious. I mean, they were still only a couple games out of the playoffs.
Right.
So
Yeah,
I think
I think the
yeah.
A's could absolutely be there, and I think something that could really hurt them, honestly, is being in Sacramento. I mean, like, I'm not having. I mean, that's just going to be a weird thing for everyone playing in a AAA ballpark. But we'll see. I think that's a fun one. So Claire and I are going to give our joint hot take. Then we're going to do some real quick reactions to NFL, and then we're going to wrap the show up. We're probably like in the next 2 minutes, all this stuff. Our hot take
Pretty rapid.
is Pete Crow Armstrong, dark horse MVP candidate
Ooh.
this season. I love PCA because he's in the Cubs. Claire loves PCA because of Harvard Westlake. And this brings us together as Sports Voice co-hosts. But like genuinely, I know he is, I mean, a true five-tool player. I think he could hit, if he hits 25 home runs, which is possible, he can do that. I think he's gotten around that in AAA in minor leagues. If he hits 25 home runs and the OPS is around the 850 mark, which if he hit 25, certainly possible. He'll probably hit for average. He'll probably like 30 bags at least. I mean, he can steal 50 bags. I mean, look, his defense will be good enough that the offense doesn't quite have to be on that level of like 950 OPS to be in the conversation for that. So I don't know. I think it's a hot take, but I think there's a world where that happens.
It's a really hot take. It's mostly just sort of like maybe us thinking about like what we would sort of want most out of the season, which is absolutely crazy. Spring training is spring training. Of course, he's batting 500. He just had like a 2 home run, 5 RBI game. It's maybe not the best way to measure things, but I mean, PTA was like one of the best center fielders in all of baseball last year. He was incredible. He steals bases like it's the Antwerp Diamond Heist. Like he's so sneaky. And now he can hit the way that he did, in high school. And kind of what the reason why he was a first round draft pick. And so I think this is
second half of last year he was hitting like that. I mean,
yes.
I think I don't have them on hand right now, but I mean he was like 800 to 850, like kind of 820-ish range OPS wise, with power. I mean, speed. He has that. Playing great defense. I mean, against the Dodgers, I don't know if you were watching these games where he saved the game for the Chicago Cubs. I don't know if you were watching.
As a Dodgers fan, as a rule to keep myself sane, I don't watch spring training. So
no. Last year in the regular season.
Last year in
the regular season. He climbed the wall.
I haven't watched. I saw that one. I haven't watched a couple spring training matchups.
No, that I was not referring
for my
to
sanity,
those.
but that game, yes. No,
All
it's
right.
good. We will be moving on to our final segment of the evening, which
NFL.
is NFL. We're gonna really have to rapid fire this because much like our previous shows were a bit
We're
over.
We're a little over here, but there's no one to. It's either this.
Been kicked out, so.
I haven't been kicked out yet, so we're just gonna keep going for a little longer, not too long. But there's been some big NFL news. I'm just gonna go off the top of my head. DK Metcalf got traded today. He's gonna be reunited with Russ and staying in.
No, he is not going to be reunited with Russ. If the Steelers re-sign Russ, I'm going to lose my mind.
You don't think that's happening?
No way.
I'm sure you'll have some takes on that.
No way.
Reunited, or not reunited, but Justin Fields? Will he be
No.
No? It's going to be Sam Darnold? I don't know, maybe? Maybe? Hopefully Sam Darnold? Well, we'll see what happens there. So. I was kind of just under the assumption that, why not just re-sign Russ? And then we got Myles Garrett, which very topical for the people we have in the studio today. Myles Garrett kind of ended the trade standoff, and he's signing back with the Browns. Geno Smith is not going to be in Seattle anymore. He's gone.
Zach Charbonnet is probably going to fall.
Zach Charbonnet can follow him.
I think the chances of Zach Charbonnet going to the Raiders are so high, and it's the most weird team in the world to me because it's already Pete Carroll and Chip Kelly, two guys who I kind of don't like either of them as a UCLA fan at this point. And Zach Charbonnet playing for both of his former coaches if he moves. I think the Seahawks are looking at a rebuild, and that feels likely. But there's just so much craziness.
So a lot of craziness, and considering we have a Browns fan and a Steelers fan in here, I think we could have some fun reactions. So try and keep it quick but passionate. You know, just let it all out.
Yeah, I mean, I can't say I'm anything other than absolutely elated at the news of Myles Garrett signing that extension with the Browns. I was worried that if Myles Garrett left, Denzel Ward and David Njoku and potentially Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah were all going to follow him and all demand trades, but this ensures that at least we'll be mid for the next 5 years instead of outright terrible. So, go Browns.
All right, so as a Steelers fan, it's been a devastating couple of years of mediocrity, and this move really solidifies the Steelers moving from 9-8 to 10-7. Very excited about our future. I am, however, very excited about the contract they gave him because 5 years, $150 million means that the Cincinnati Bengals are going to pay Jamar Chase so much money, and it's going to absolutely. Their cap is going to be ruined over the next several seasons. So I'm very happy about that. If the Steelers re-sign Russ, I will become a national security threat for at least 4 hours following that news. I can't promise when that'll end. So if Omar Khan is out there listening, please do not re-sign Russ for the safety of the entirety of America.
I guess you guys talked about the two other big moves, so I'll talk about Geno Smith. I just don't understand this trade from like a logical perspective. I get why Pete Carroll wants his former quarterback. That's kind of the obvious reason here, but like this trade doesn't do anything for either team. I think the Raiders have condemned themselves to mediocrity. Like with Geno Smith, they're not going to win a Super Bowl with him. I don't think they get anywhere beyond like. I mean, he's better than Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, but it's not like the biggest improvement in the world. Like I think they are at a point where like a rebuild makes more sense than trying to just stay in this loop of being 5-12, 6-11 each season. I don't think Geno gets them that much further. And with the Seahawks, like, I don't know what quarterback you're going to get. Maybe Sam Darnold. I've heard the rumors today. But, like, beyond Geno, I don't know who you're going to get who's that much better than him. I mean, yes, if you're trying to rebuild, that makes sense. But, like, the Seahawks weren't a bad team last year. They were okay. I mean, they were, like, I think they were, like, 8-9 on the season. They weren't that bad. So this just doesn't make a lot of sense to me beyond the point of, like, Pete Carroll wanting his old quarterback in Las Vegas, which, I mean, that's obvious. But I feel like for both teams, this just is not a great trade, and it won't end up doing them anything. I'm excited to see what happens tomorrow, especially. It's going to be a crazy day. Already a crazy day today. Josh Allen got the extension. There's been a lot going on, so I don't know what for the Jets. I'm not excited, but for the league overall, super excited to see what goes down.
All right. Well, with that, we got some NFL hot takes out of the way. It is time to wrap things up here on Sports Voice, our second to last. Thank you guys for coming on. Glad we had 6 guests today. We're at a little bit over time, but not egregious. So it is what it is. Glad you guys could join us here today. Really fun stuff. And for those of you listening, one more chance to listen to us over the airwaves as host of this show. I can't talk. Maybe that's why they're not letting us do that anymore. Because I can't talk.
So sad.
So sad. No, but we are excited for next week's episode. I'm tired.
All right, okay, I'm gonna take over.
Claire's taking over.
We're so excited for next week's episode, our final of our tenure as Sports Voice hosts. We've had so much fun. Next week we're gonna have a crazy episode. I can't make too many promises about what's gonna happen. We still kind of have to plan that and
Yes.
take our finals. But it's going to be a fun episode. So many more. I mean, college basketball is really going to start to get interesting. So we'll talk college basketball. We'll do lacrosse for Northwestern. We'll have maybe the craziest pick'ems we've ever had. I feel like we're descending into madness there. And national sports talk only going to get more interesting as we transition into baseball. So yeah, it'll be a great episode. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. For Sammy, I'm Claire Connor, and you've been listening to WNUR Sports.